Complete game coverage of the Cougars is right here on the KSL Sports Zone. The Cougars return home for a battle against TCU. Your home for the best coverage of Cougar football is right here on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Woo!
Jacob Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. The Cougs going to try and bounce back coming up tomorrow against TCU. Let's talk to the voice of BYU, the one and only Greg Wrubell. What's going on, Greg?
Hey, Greg.
Hey, guys. Good to be with you.
Appreciate you jumping on with us. Obviously, a very tough game last weekend. As you've been around the team some this week, how has the response been? This is something they have not experienced yet this year.
Yeah, they did experience it last year, though, and didn't have the best response to it, right? They went 9-0 after beating Utah, lost at home to Kansas, and then had a terrible first half against Arizona State. Were out of the game, got themselves back into the game, lost a one-score game, but it was the response to that first loss that really took BYU out of any shot of getting to Arlington last year. So they've been given the chance for a do-over, is what it comes down to, right? They know how it felt to lose a game after being undefeated last year. They've done that again this year. And then now can they avoid, the hangover that afflicted the Cougars last year in going to Tempe? The big difference this year, of course, is they get to come home for this next game. And they haven't been home for 4 weeks. It's been a long time. The Utah game was the last home game for BYU because you went road game, bye-week road game. So it's actually been a while. No better time to get home and ideally get a little bit healthier. The hope would be LJ Martin is better, in his second week off the bye instead of the first week as he was last week. And they certainly need him to have a good stretch run. I think it's encouraging that Isaiah Glasgow and Jack Kelly looked like themselves again last week. And so, the hope is for this 3-game stretch run, your best guys can be your best guys. And a lot of that is health dependent. And so, crossing fingers that the healing hands can do their work and BYU can have close to a full-strength group of their prime players for these final 3 games.
How do you think BYU matches up against Texas Christian this year?
Well, I do like the fact that, TCU's not overwhelming on the ground. I look at some of the recent rush numbers. This is the last 6 games. You see a 10 rushing yards. You see a 94, a 72, a 96, a 113. Good rushing game against Baylor, but that's 1 in 6 games, really. And so what that does is put it more on the arm of Josh Hoover. Well, we know what Hoover did to BYU in his first start for TCU 2 years ago in Fort Worth. He went for 460 and 4 touchdowns and threw the ball 60 times. Now, this year, BYU's pass defense is much better than it was 2 years ago. In fact, the Cougars ranked 13th nationally in pass efficiency rating defense. And so should this be a big throw game for Josh Hoover, I think BYU has the manpower to match up that way. And so from that standpoint, they appear to be strongest throwing the ball, and that's where BYU appears to be strongest defensively.
How do you expect Bear to react? I think what has been so amazing to me is that, and I've said this earlier this week, not just from drive to drive or game to game, I mean, literally throw to throw. He will throw an interception and then make the best throw of the game the very next passing attempt. I've been so impressed with his, ability to keep his head in the game.
Yeah, when you ask how he'll respond, I think it'll be how he responds to everything that's happened, good or bad, through the last 6 months, quite frankly. He's been, the word that comes most to mind when people talk about him is composure. You don't always get that for a true freshman, but you do with this guy. So, yeah, I don't expect him. I mean, clearly he was hard on himself after the last game. He felt responsible for the way things went in Lubbock, but they know that he's a bounce-back guy. He's going to be a bounce-back guy, and nothing really rattles the dude. And so you like that about your guy, and they don't need Bear to go out and win the game by himself tomorrow. But he's a guy that's proven that when a play has to be made, you want the ball in his hands. I like that about him.
I'm sure we asked you this at the time, Greg, so I apologize if I'm asking you again, but what were your expectations for the Bear at the beginning of the season, and has he exceeded those?
Well, second part of the question, yes. And the first part, I expected him to be eased into Aaron Roderick's playbook, and that's exactly what happened. But what didn't happen was the training wheels be kept on for too long. They came off rather early. I thought by the time BYU hit conference play at Colorado, the whole playbook was kind of open to him. And he'd already shown the ability to make, line of scrimmage decisions that were the right calls. And so, and you don't expect to be 8-0 with a true freshman quarterback. You expect a hiccup here or there, but they didn't come. You could argue BYU maybe didn't dominate teams, but they were winning games and doing it with a guy that was doing it for the first time at the P4 level. So, that part exceeded expectations. But there came a point once the training wheels did come off where you just thought of Bear as any other quarterback, not necessarily a true freshman quarterback. But, if you throw the scenario at anybody saying, okay, Jake Retzloff, your would-be senior starter goes out 2 months before the season and you're bringing in a guy that's never taken a snap at the FBS level, is that team going to be undefeated going into November? I'm not sure how many yeses you get on that, but that's where BYU was. And so not that they're exactly playing with house money right now because, there's a lot on the line here the next 3 weeks. Clearly, it goes without saying. But the fact that they got to where they got with a true freshman quarterback, if you'd said, back in July or when training camp started in August, okay, we're going to have, Bear Bachmeier 9 games in, fully acclimated. And what you've got to do is you've got to win 2 home games and a game at Cincinnati, and we'll put you in Arlington. How about that? I think you would take that and say, let's go with it. And that's where BYU finds himself right now. Now, TCU is no slouch, and even the UCF season ender you can't look past. But, not a bad scenario to be in if you're BYU. And, again, they had this experience last year. They knew, going into their last 4 games, you go 3-1, you're playing in the Big 12 championship. You go 2-1, you're playing in the Big 12 championship. They didn't get there. This year, the task is a little taller. It's 3-0 in your final 3 games, but it's a doable thing. But it all hinges on tomorrow. Tomorrow's kind of the linchpin game. If you can beat TCU, a program that's beaten you 5 times in a row, if you can beat TCU, you can probably beat Cincinnati and UCF.
Going into these last few weeks of the season, the target on BYU's back grows bigger. The better teams find a way to take their game to the next level. Can JoJo Phillips help BYU add maybe another dimension or strengthen an already very strong positive they have on the offensive side of the ball?
The musical intro you had coming into my segment was Higher Ground from Stevie Wonder, and that's where BYU needs to get to in these next 3 games, and JoJo can be a part of that. I think people maybe overlook the loss of JoJo and what he might have brought to this team. I think Aaron was planning on having a pretty big season as a different kind of outside threat for BYU. Chase and Parker are super reliable, but JoJo was a different kind of player. You think about where BYU was last year with Keelan Marion, with Darius Lassiter, and with JoJo Phillips. And I'm sure there was a point last year where Aaron thought he'd have all 3 of those guys this year. Well, for most of this year, he had none of them. With Keelan going to Miami, Darius not getting an extra year, and JoJo being hurt. So I think the attack Aaron Roderick hoped to have, he had to really modify and adjust. We didn't see that yet. And so, how much can JoJo do? Well, we saw last week that we saw rust. We saw inconsistency. We saw a big drop at a big time, a guy playing his first game in about 2 months is what you saw. So the hope is he's shaking the rust off and he can actually be a lid lifter here over these last 3 games because I think he was a big missing piece of this offense. And I think when it comes to missing pieces, guys, the Sione Moa absence maybe doesn't get enough attention. BYU's running back room took a massive hit, and he would have been a huge compliment to LJ Martin. He would have been the thunder to the lightning, and it would have created less wear and tear, I think, on LJ's body. Sione is a big loss, and not getting him back to this point in the year, that's one of the reasons BYU's been in so many of these battles. They've been winning games, but not really dominating games. And I think Sione was a force that could have helped to BYU to dominate out of the backfield this year.
Greg, if we had you on 10 years ago and you jumped on the show and you said, Jake, BYU is going to be playing a top 10 showdown in basketball in 10 years, I would have said, Greg, put the lid back on your Sharpie. I think the fumes are getting to you. How wild is that? 2 top 10 teams going head-to-head, college basketball, UConn, BYU tomorrow. That's wild. It's wild where things have come.
As Johnny Carson might have said, it's wild and wanky. And yet, I mean, everything changed when NIL came in without the guardrails, right? And Power Conference membership was the other, half of the equation for BYU. So, yeah, when you're toiling in the WCC 10 years ago, it would have been tough to see. You were still trying to just take care of Gonzaga and St. Mary's on a regular basis and hoping that the WCC can be a 2-bid league. And now you find yourself in an 8-bid league or a 9-bid league, and you can attract pretty much anybody that has interest in BYU the way the rules are currently. So, yeah, there's no way anybody could have foreseen our current environment 10 years ago, maybe not even 5 years ago, although it was starting to, maybe inch in toward this territory. the way that things have exponentially changed has changed the game for not just BYU, but so many other programs. And yeah, it's great to be a part of it and attached to it and have these kinds of games. Of course, I won't be in Boston for the UConn game, but heaven knows there are enough big time and big name games for BYU all season long. These non-conference games that BYU is getting at these neutral venues, Villanova in Vegas, UConn in Boston, Wisconsin in Salt Lake City, Miami, Dayton, or Georgetown in Orlando, Clemson in New York City. And that just primes you for Big 12 play, where, yes, you're going to be in Lawrence, Kansas, playing Kansas. You're going to have Houston at your place. You're going to have Arizona twice. And so the big names just keep on coming. So UConn is the tip of the iceberg for BYU in terms of marquee opportunities. But, the more important game for Cougar Nation clearly happens at LaVell Edwards Stadium. UConn and BYU, that's mid-November basketball. It's a good game. It's a good RPI. It's a good a net rating game, let's say. But just one of many, many opportunities in a 35 to 40 game season. You get only 12 cracks in the regular season in football, 13 or maybe 14 at max. And it's a game of the year for BYU in football. And it's the next game of the year because last week was the game of the year. And now this week's the game of the year. And if they win tomorrow, Cincinnati's going to be the game of the year. And the next most important game in BYU football history, because all these games really are, guys, with so much on the line, with Big 12 title and CFP in play, BYU's never played more important football games ever. And so tomorrow's just the latest, next, biggest, greatest game.
Before we leave basketball alone, I've been extraordinarily impressed with A.J. DeBonce's maturity. A lot of five-star freshmen come in and want to score as many points as possible. He truly seems to be doing whatever he has to that night specifically to put the team in a good situation to win, and they are 3-0. What have you seen from him?
Well, I've seen a parallel to Bear Bachmeier in terms of a guy that appears ready to do it at a high level. And it's a little different. Bear didn't come in with all of the national and international acclaim that comes with the career of A.J. DeBonce, playing, for Team USA for years now and coming in as the number one rated high school recruit by most sources in the country. That wasn't Bear's entry to BYU. He was well thought of. I mean, when Stanford signed Bear Bachmeier, it was a big deal. And he had a lot of big names after him, but it wasn't the A.J. scenario. But the common tie, guys, is the composure, the steady hand, the not phased. And A.J.'s been around this at such a high spotlight level for so long. It's just another year of attention for him, and he's handling it well. And I do think of him not just as a guy that's got to be, a 20-point-a-game guy or a 25-point-a-game guy, but a true playmaker. Whatever the play is to be made, he tends to make the right one, whether it's taking it himself or finding the open guy. That's who you want on your team, a guy that can dominate when domination is needed, but a guy that's not going to forget about his teammates and is going to make, generally speaking, the right play. That's how you get to be an MVP of an international tournament over the summer, is you make enough right plays over enough games against high-caliber competition that everyone observing says he was the most important guy on the floor.
Greg, we appreciate you jumping on the show. Thank you very much. We'll be listening tomorrow, and good luck keeping Hans in line. I know it's a hard job.
Thanks, Greg.
Well, I appreciate you guys, as always, for the invite, and, give Hans a poke in the ribs today for me, and we'll be seeing him and all of Cougar Nation tomorrow. Appreciate it.
I will not be doing that, Greg. No, I will not be doing that. Thank you, sir. We appreciate it.
See you, Greg.
All right, take care, guys.